Have you ever wondered what your distinct, unique purpose in this world is? Many people have asked me this question, and when we speak about the fact that every single person is put here by God for a distinct purpose, they say, well, how can I know what that is? One of the keys to knowing what that is lies deep within you. The only one that can truly answer that question is you or someone who knows you very well. Here is a letter that the Rebbe wrote to a woman in 1953, addressing this very question. And what we find very often is that we know the answer to the question. Not only do we have the keys to the answer, but there's some part of us that knows the answer, but there is great resistance to openly and fully embracing that this is who I am, that God designed me to be, and this is what my purpose is. And the Rebbe addresses this with this woman very boldly, taking a stand for her in a very strong way to embolden her to be able to have the comfort to stand in the knowledge that she already has but is resisting. And he begins the letter by saying, and I'm going to be paraphrasing the letter, that you describe your emotional state. This woman is a teacher of girls in a school. And she wrote to the Rebbe about her emotional state about teaching. She's not sure whether she should be teaching or not. And all of this I glean from the response of the Rebbe. That's how I know what she's written in a very general sense. The Rebbe also says, I received a letter from the girls who you are teaching. And they also reflect the same mood that you reflect in your letter. And he says that's natural because a teacher is generally reflected in their students. So in other words, and this already is a subtlety of a statement telling her that who you show up as in class gets reflected into your students. The teaching is already there. How are you showing up as a teacher? The Rebbe doesn't say any of that explicitly. I'm expounding on the fact that the Rebbe just makes a statement that it's natural that your students' letter or letters have the same sense and mood that your letter has. And then the Rebbe begins a response to her. He says, in response to your letter, you are an immigrant from Russia. This woman apparently recently was able to get out of Russia. And he says, you remember all of your challenges, the enormous challenges that you had to be able to go from Russia and get out of the country, which was no simple matter in those days. Many people had to do that in very, very tricky ways. And the Rebbe says the world is not a random place. So when all of these unbelievable things happened that coincided to be able to permit that you would be able to leave the country without being caught or without getting into trouble or with things, circumstances working out, that was not random because the world isn't a random place. God supervises everything. Everything is supervised by God, and this is a fundamental in our faith. And then the Rebbe says that every single Jew has this faith embedded within them, because if you have a Jewish soul, you know intuitively, because the soul is a piece of God, you know intuitively that there is a God and that God is the one who supervises and orchestrates everything going on in the world. And whether this faith is in a revealed state by the person, by the Jew, or not. Some people are in denial of it. That doesn't change the fact that they have this faith. It just changes the fact that they're not in touch with it. Now, there's not a single thing that God does in this world that is for naught, that is for nothing. Every single thing God does has a purpose, but not just a purpose. It has a particular purpose. That means if something occurs to someone, then it occurs for a particular purpose, for a particular reason. If that purpose for which God supervises and orchestrates something, if that purpose for which God orchestrated something is not then actualized by the person, God forbid, even worse, the person does the opposite of the reason why God actually brought something into actualization, we can all understand the damage that this creates to the person who is not living up to the very purpose God brought them to wherever they are, and to the entire world, because of the ripple effects that what we do has, where we are not bringing purpose to a certain place in life, which then has so much impact, whether we see that or not, is now all of that is being lost. That creates a lot of damage to the person and to the world. So it's clear to all that providence saved you from destruction. Why? Why did God save you from getting lost and destroyed, a high likelihood of being killed in Russia? The Rebbe says it's not due to your righteousness. It's not because you're some super righteous person and therefore God saved you. No, it's for a specific purpose, because God needs you for a purpose. That's the reason why God does everything. And anyone that is endowed with certain talents, they must look at these talents as well as being given to me. I was given these talents for a purpose. And therefore, the Rebbe says, anyone endowed with the power of influence in any capacity, and in the case of this woman, in the capacity of being a teacher has great influence, must use that gift, that endowment, for the good of the environment around them, not simply for themselves. We have to do it. We have to ask ourselves, how can I make the world a better place with what God endowed me with? And we must do so for the younger generation, because the younger generation is desperately seeking direction. This is true all the time, that the youth are always seeking direction. They desperately need to be guided. And then the Rebbe says, while I've said enough, I will expound further, although it is unnecessary. After God saved you with the miracles that he performed, and he put you in a place where you can achieve wonders, and the ability to achieve these wonders does not require mesiras nefesh, which means self-sacrifice. When you were in Russia, there was a requirement of self-sacrifice. Your life was on the line to live as a Jew. But now you're in a free country, and your ability to actually use the gifts that God endowed you with does not, and achieve wonders by doing that, does not require mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice, only mesiras haratzon. That means only the willingness, your willingness to give yourself over to this commitment. That's all that it requires. You don't have to sacrifice yourself. You don't have to put your life on the line. You just need to be willing to give over your commitment to this. And most certainly, you should overlook your own interests and use the gifts that God endowed you with to devote it to truth. That means this gift of influence. The only difficulty that there is in fulfilling this is the discipline of responsibility towards this. In Hebrew, the language that the Rebbe uses is Kabbalas Ol, which I'm translating as the discipline of responsibility towards this, that you make a commitment towards this. Acknowledge, the Rebbe tells her, the opportunity and the responsibility, and surely don't destroy it. That's the worst thing that can be done. Use your talents fully, not partially. Instill faith in your students with no room for doubt. Teach them faith in a manner that they know without question that there is a God in this world. And don't forget this truth, that any apparent doubts that someone has in themselves about the gifts that God endowed them with is fantasy that sprouts forth from the evil of the world and your own evil inclination, which is essentially the embodiment of evil that is embodied within every single one of us as God designed us. But don't take it seriously, because it's just fantasy. The truth is that God endowed you with an ability. You know what that ability is. You're already in the position to use it fully. Embrace it. Take it on fully. You're not the first or the last in this situation where you have a gift and you're questioning whether this is really the reason. Is this really what God wants for me? Experience has shown that those who have held on to Torah values, whether we are talking about on a national scale, where there are large groups of Jews who held on to Torah values, which experience has shown that they always persevered and perpetuated. They continued on. Whereas, God forbid, in the opposite, where someone didn't take on Torah values, or groups of Jews that deviated from Torah values, unfortunately, with time, have slowly disappeared as a part of the Jewish people. This is true not only nationally, but this is also true individually. That when an individual sets their life firmly on Torah values, they will always see success and they will see results from their efforts. God gifted you with a talent of influence. You have a duty to use it out fully. And even if you don't understand everything that I am saying to you fully yet, and you're not grasping it intellectually, and you're saying, well, first I need to understand this myself, I have to think about it and dwell on it and come to it, and once I understand it fully, then I can take on this position of teaching with such commitment. The Rebbe says, no, we cannot wait, because the students can't afford to wait. Every day that passes is lost and cannot be retrieved. You can never retrieve time back. And so the Rebbe concludes by saying, to me, without a doubt, your purpose, your reason that God saved you from the other country and brought you here is to exert the influence God endowed you with. And then the Rebbe says a very interesting line. He says, we don't debate with God. In other words, the Rebbe is saying it's clear that this is what God is telling you, that this is your purpose. So that's clear. And if God's telling you that, don't debate with God. And he concludes with tremendous blessings. Look, you know that the main talents that you have been blessed with. If you don't, go to any of your very close friends or relatives. They will be able to point it out to you very clearly. You can find what environment the circumstances of life have put you in. In other words, that God put you in, the community you're living in, the people you're being exposed to. You intuitively, somewhere deep down, know what it is that God wants from you. Dedicate yourself to it. Know without hesitation, this is what God wants, and run with it fully. And you're going to see wondrous things happen.